Wealthy rancher bets his fortune that no one can touch his bull, but a girl surprises him. Richard Thompson never imagined that a joke-like proposal would change his life forever. The biggest rancher in the Dallas region had just made the boldest bet of his career, offering half of his $1 million fortune to anyone who could touch Thunder, his most valuable and feared breeding bull. The crowd packed into the cattle auction at Clearwater Ranch erupted in murmurs as the words left the businessman's mouth. Richard held a contract signed by his lawyer, officially validating the offer he'd just made. The black bull, with its imposing horns and weighing over 800 kilograms, had become a living legend in the area. No ranch hand, vet or trainer had managed to get close without being attacked. Then, a small, fragile voice cut through the crowd's chatter. "I want to try." All eyes turned to a little girl, no more than 7 years old, standing in the middle of the makeshift bleachers. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and she wore a faded beige dress that had seen better days. What stood out most were her bare feet, covered in the red dust typical of the region. Richard let out a loud laugh that echoed through the barn. "Well, folks, we've got a brave volunteer here." He pointed at the girl with a mocking grin. "What's your name, little one?" "Emily," she answered, slowly climbing down from the bleachers. "Emily Wilson." Richard's smile froze on his face. That last name stirred a memory he'd tried to bury long ago. Wilson. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Wilson," he repeated, his voice now quieter. "You wouldn't happen to be related to Thomas Wilson, would you?" Emily stopped mid-step and stared at him with a seriousness beyond her years. "He was my grandfather," she said, lifting her chin, "and I've come to claim what's rightfully ours." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. The older auction attendees knew the story of Thomas Wilson, the model employee who had worked at Clearwater Ranch for over 20 years before being controversially fired. Many whispered the dismissal had been unjust, but no one had ever dared to publicly question Richard Thompson's decisions. "Come here, my dear," a firm voice called from the back of the barn. A woman around 65 years old approached, walking with determined steps despite the cane she carried. Her grey hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her brown eyes shone with a resolve that mirrored the little girl's. It was Margaret Wilson, Thomas's widow, known in the area for her strong personality and the unconditional love she gave her orphaned granddaughter. "Mrs. Margaret," Richard nodded, trying to keep his composure. "I didn't know you were here." "I came because I heard about your bet," she replied, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "And my granddaughter has as much right as anyone here to try and touch Thunder. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. The vet present at the auction, Dr. Parker, stepped forward with a worried expression. "With all due respect, this is madness," he said, adjusting his glasses. "That bull has already injured 3 experienced ranch hands this year. A child shouldn't even get near him." "The bet was clear," Margaret countered, pulling a crumpled paper from her pocket. "I read the ad in the paper. Anyone who touches the animal gets half the fortune. There was no minimum age specified." Richard found himself cornered by his own words. The bet had been made impulsively, as a way to entertain the guests and showcase the value of his prized bull. He never imagined someone would actually attempt it, much less the granddaughter of Thomas Wilson. "Look, maybe I went too far with the joke," he began to backpedal. "I can offer a smaller prize more suitable for—" "This isn't a joke," Emily interrupted, her voice sounding wiser than her years. "You made a promise in front of all these people. My grandmother always taught me that a man's word is sacred." The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Some people started taking photos and recording with their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The tension in the air was palpable, and Richard felt all eyes on him. "Fine," he sighed, seeing no way out. "But I won't take responsibility for whatever happens. The bull is in the back pen, and if she can touch him without getting attacked, I'll keep my word." Emily nodded and began walking toward the pens, followed by her grandmother and a curious crowd. Richard lingered a few steps behind, his heart tight with nervousness and something else he couldn't quite name. The pen where Thunder was kept isolated was a sturdy structure of wood and iron, designed specifically to contain the most temperamental animal on the ranch. The bull stood in the center of the enclosure, his black coat gleaming under the afternoon sun. When he noticed the approaching crowd, he lifted his head and let out a deep, almost threatening sound. "My heavens," one of the spectators murmured. "That beast really is haunted." Emily approached the fence slowly, showing no sign of fear. Thunder watched her with dark eyes, his flared nostrils catching her scent. The animal scraped the ground with one front hoof, a clear sign of agitation. "Emily, my dear," Margaret whispered, gripping her cane tightly. "Are you sure about this?" "I am, Grandma," she replied, never taking her eyes off the bull. "Grandpa always told me stories about Thunder. He was born here on the ranch, wasn't he?" The question was directed at Richard, who swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, about 8 years ago." "And who took care of him when he was a calf?" Emily continued, her calm voice contrasting with the tension in the air. Richard hesitated. The truth was something he had tried to erase from his memory, but the girl's presence was bringing it all back. "Several workers helped," he replied evasively. "That's a lie," Margaret cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. "It was my husband who saved that calf when he was born premature. Thomas spent 3 sleepless nights, bottle feeding him every hour, keeping him warm, caring for him like his own child." The revelation caused a stir among the onlookers. Many of the ranch's longtime workers nodded in confirmation, remembering the time Thomas had practically adopted the orphaned calf. "That's why he grew so strong," Margaret continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "My husband always said Thunder had a good heart, but grew bitter when he no longer saw the one who cared for him so tenderly." Emily turned back to the bull, placing her hands on the fence. "You remember Grandpa Thomas, don't you?" she whispered. "He talked about you until his last days, said you were special, that you had a big heart hidden behind all that fierceness." The bull stopped pawing the ground and tilted his head, as if trying to understand her words. His usually fierce eyes seemed different now, almost nostalgic. Richard grew increasingly uneasy. The dismissal of Thomas had been an impulsive decision, made during a difficult period in his personal life. The employee had questioned some of the ranch's practices, suggesting more humane methods for handling the animals. At the time, Richard interpreted this as insubordination, but as the years passed, he began to realize he might have made a mistake. "Mr. Thompson," a young man approached him. "I'm Michael, your son. I just got here after seeing the videos on social media." Richard turned, surprised to see the son, who had distanced himself from the family 2 years earlier after an argument about the ranch's direction. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "I came because I needed to see this for myself," he replied, looking at Emily with admiration, "and also because it's time we talked about some truths that have been hidden for too long." The situation was growing more complicated by the minute. Emily remained focused on the bull, completely ignoring the commotion around her. She began making slow movements with her hands, as if trying to calm the animal through gestures. "What is she doing?" asked Dr. Parker, intrigued. "Those are the same gestures Thomas used," answered an elderly ranch hand who had worked with the late man. "He developed his own technique for handling agitated animals. I've never seen anything like it." Margaret smiled through her tears. "Thomas taught Emily those techniques when she was little. He always said she had a natural gift for understanding animals. Even after you sent him away from the ranch, he kept sharing his knowledge with his granddaughter." Richard's heart grew heavier. He was beginning to understand the full weight of what he'd done by firing Thomas. He hadn't just taken away a family's livelihood, he'd separated a man from his passion and from an animal he'd practically raised himself. Emily slowly opened the corral gate. A murmur of apprehension rippled through the crowd, and several people instinctively stepped back. Thunder watched the girl's every move, but remained still, as if assessing her intentions. "Emily, no!" Dr. Parker shouted. "It's too dangerous." "Let her be." Margaret held the vet's arm. "My granddaughter knows what she's doing. Thomas prepared her for this moment, even if he didn't know it would come." The girl stepped into the corral with slow, deliberate steps. Thunder snorted loudly but didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the small figure approaching, as if trying to recognize something familiar in her. "Hi, Thunder," Emily said softly. I'm Emily, your Thomas's granddaughter. He talked about you so much. He said you were the most beautiful calf he'd ever seen. The bull tilted his head slightly, a gesture that surprised everyone present. It was completely uncharacteristic for an animal known for his aggression. He said you liked it when he sang that song. How did it go again? Emily paused a few feet from the animal, closing her eyes to concentrate. Oh, I remember. She began humming a simple melody, a lullaby Thomas had often used to calm the ranch's animals. The child's voice echoed through the corral, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Thunder lowered his head slowly, his eyes closing as if transported to a distant time when he was just a fragile calf being cared for by gentle hands. I can't believe what I'm seeing, Michael murmured, recording everything on his phone. Richard stood frozen. Long suppressed memories flooded back. He recalled Thomas singing that same song during the nights he spent nursing the sick calf. He remembered the employee's dedication, the tender way he treated every animal on the ranch. Emily took a few more steps toward the bull. Thunder opened his eyes and watched her again, but this time his gaze was different. There was no more aggression, only a kind of recognition, as if he had finally found something he'd been searching for a long time. You miss him, don't you? She whispered, slowly extending her hand. I miss him too. He left us 6 months ago, but he always talked about you. Said one day I'd meet the most special bull in the world. The silence was absolute. Not even the wind dared to break the sacred moment unfolding before the crowd. Emily was now just an arm's length away from the animal, her small hand reaching toward him. Thunder sniffed the air around the girl, catching not just her scent but perhaps something deeper, a familiar essence that connected him to the man who had been his first protector. Grandpa always said you were tough on the outside but had a soft heart, Emily continued, her voice growing quieter. He never forgot about you, you know. Even in his last days, when he was so weak, he talked about his Thunder, the calf he helped raise. A tear rolled down Margaret's face. She remembered perfectly how her husband had spoken of the bull, even after the humiliating dismissal. Thomas had never held a grudge, only longing. Thunder took a step toward the girl. The crowd collectively held their breath, expecting the worst. But the bull simply lowered his massive head to Emily's level, as if offering himself to be touched. Emily smiled, tears finally spilling from her eyes. With delicate movements, she placed her small hands on the animal's forehead, just as her grandfather had taught her in his stories. Hi, big guy, she whispered. We finally really met. Thunder closed his eyes and gently pressed his head against the girl, as if he had at last found the peace he'd been searching for. The moment was so moving that even the toughest men in the crowd felt their eyes grow damp. Richard fell to his knees. The weight of guilt he'd carried for years had finally become unbearable. He hadn't just taken a man's livelihood, he'd separated an animal from the one who loved him most. I'm sorry, he murmured, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Margaret approached him, leaning on her cane. Thomas never held a grudge against you, she said softly. He always said people make bad choices when they're hurting. He knew you were going through a hard time when you let him go. That doesn't excuse what I did, Richard replied, wiping his eyes. Thomas was the best worker I ever had, and I treated him like he was nothing. Michael stepped closer to his father and placed a hand on his shoulder. Dad, maybe it's time to make things right. Emily kept stroking Thunder, who seemed to be in heaven. The bull had lain down in the pen, letting the girl come even closer. It was a sight no one there would ever forget. The bet has been fulfilled, declared Richard's lawyer, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal. The girl touched the animal. Technically, she's entitled to half the fortune. The statement snapped everyone back to reality. Emily had truly done the impossible, and now she was owed a fortune. I don't want the money, she said, standing and turning to Richard. The declaration stunned them all. What do you mean you don't want it? Someone from the crowd called out. I want justice, Emily replied, her voice steady despite her youth. I want you to publicly admit my grandfather was fired unfairly. I want him remembered as the good man he always was. Richard stood up slowly, brushing the dust off his knees. You're right, Emily. Thomas Wilson was the best worker this ranch ever had. He was an honest, dedicated man who loved what he did. Firing him was a terrible mistake I made out of pride and ignorance. He turned to the crowd, which had grown considerably with the arrival of more onlookers drawn by social media posts. Thomas Wilson saved Thunder's life when he was just a sick calf. Thanks to his care, that animal became the most valuable stud in the region, and I never publicly acknowledged that. I never gave him the credit he deserved. Margaret felt her legs grow weak. Those were the words she had dreamed of hearing for years, the recognition her late husband deserved. Besides, Richard continued, I'd like to propose something. Emily, you showed today that you have a special connection with animals, something you inherited from your grandfather. How about we work together to create a humane management program here at the ranch? Your grandmother could coordinate the project, and you could visit regularly to teach us those special techniques. Emily looked at Margaret, who nodded with a radiant smile. What about the bet money? The girl asked. It could fund the program, Michael suggested. Build a training center, rehire the workers who were wronged, modernize the facilities for the animals' well-being. The proposal was met with enthusiastic applause from the crowd. Many began to comment on how wonderful it would be to see the ranch become a model for humane animal care. Dr. Parker approached Emily, still amazed by what he had witnessed. Young lady, I've worked with animals for over 30 years and I've never seen anything like this. You truly have a special gift. It's not a gift, Emily smiled. It's love. My grandfather taught me that when you treat animals with real kindness, they feel it and respond the same way. Thunder stood up and walked to the fence where Margaret was. The elderly woman reached out a trembling hand, and the bull allowed her to touch him too, as if recognizing her as the widow of the man who had loved him so much. Thomas, she whispered, stroking the animal's muzzle. Are you seeing this from up there? Your granddaughter did it. She brought justice to your name. Tears streamed freely down the woman's face, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. Finally, after years of pain and humiliation, her family had found the redemption they deserved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days following the extraordinary events at the auction, the story of Emily and Thunder spread far beyond the borders of Dallas. Journalists from across the country arrived at Clearwater Ranch to document the transformation taking place. Richard kept his word in an exemplary way. He hired a team of architects specializing in animal welfare to redesign the ranch's facilities. The old pen, where Thunder had been isolated, was turned into a spacious paddock with natural shade and an artificial pond so the bull could cool off on the hottest days. Margaret was officially named coordinator of the Thomas Wilson Humane Management Program, a tribute to her husband who had finally received the recognition he deserved. The program's first action was to rehire all the workers who had been unfairly dismissed over the years, offering fair wages and respectful working conditions. Emily became a regular visitor to the ranch, going there every Wednesday and weekend to help train the ranch hands. Her special connection with the animals impressed everyone, and she quickly became the most beloved person on the ranch. Aunt Emily, the workers' children would shout when they saw her arrive. She had earned that affectionate title from the ranch kids, even though she was younger than many of them. A month after the auction incident, the ranch received a visit from a committee of veterinarians and animal behavior specialists from Texas A&M University. They wanted to study the methods developed by Thomas and refined by Emily. It's extraordinary, remarked Professor Dr. Sarah Johnson, the team leader. The way she interacts with the animals challenges much of what we know about bovine behavior. There's a genuine emotional connection that transcends the barriers between species. Emily, who had grown shy under so much academic attention, hid behind Thunder when the researchers tried to ask overly technical questions. The bull, sensing the girl's discomfort, positioned himself protectively, like a gentle guardian. She doesn't like talking about it as if it was science, Margaret explained to the researchers. To her, it's simply love. Thomas always said the secret wasn't in techniques or methods, but in treating each animal as a unique individual with their own feelings and needs. The transformation in Richard Thompson was also remarkable. The man once known for his tough personality and authoritarian decisions had become someone entirely different. He spent hours talking with the workers, listening to their suggestions and constantly implementing improvements. "Dad, you're unrecognizable," Michael commented during one of his visits, "and it's wonderful." "That girl taught me that being strong doesn't mean being cruel," Richard replied, watching Emily play with the calves in the pasture. "Thomas tried to teach me that years ago, but I was too blind to see." The relationship between father and son had also grown stronger. Michael had decided to move back to the ranch and help implement the new management model. His business training combined with Richard's experience and Margaret's wisdom created a truly effective leadership team. One day, while Emily was helping treat a cow that had complications during birth, she made an observation that surprised everyone. "You know, Mrs. Wilson," she said, gently stroking the animal, "sometimes I feel like Grandpa is here, helping me understand what the animals are feeling." Margaret smiled, wiping away a tear. "I think he really is, my dear. Thomas always said true love never dies. It just changes form." The conversation was overheard by Richard, who quietly approached the group. "Emily," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" She nodded, still focused on the cow. "Do you forgive me for what I did to your grandfather?" The girl stopped what she was doing and looked at him with eyes too wise for her age. "My grandpa always told me that holding on to bitterness only hurts the one who holds it, not the one who did wrong," she replied. "He forgave you long before he passed. He said people do bad things when their hearts are hurting." "He was right," Richard sighed. "When I fired him, I was going through a tough divorce, losing custody of Michael, facing financial troubles. I took my anger out on someone who didn't deserve it." "And now?" Emily asked. "Is your heart still hurting?" Richard looked around, seeing the happy workers, the healthy and well-cared-for animals, the thriving ranch full of life. "No," he answered with conviction. "Now my heart is healed, and it was all of you who healed it." The cow Emily had been treating slowly stood up, now recovered from the birth. The calf, a small brown-coated male, wobbled until it could stand and search for its mother's milk. "Look how beautiful," Emily smiled. "Another life beginning right here on the ranch." "What should we name him?" Margaret asked. Emily thought for a moment, watching the little animal. "Thomas," she finally said, "in honor of Grandpa." The name was unanimously approved, and the calf Thomas became another symbol of the renewal that had taken over Clearwater Ranch. 2 months after the historic auction, the ranch received its official Humane Management certification, becoming the first rural property in the region to earn this recognition. The certificate presentation ceremony was held in the same barn where it had all begun. Emily stood on stage alongside Richard, Margaret, and Michael, but the one who drew the most attention was Thunder, who had been brought to participate in the ceremony. The bull, now gentle and sociable, wore a blue ribbon around his neck and seemed proud to be part of that special moment. "When I started this ranch 20 years ago," Richard addressed the crowd, "I believed success meant profit at any cost. Today, thanks to a brave girl and the memory of an extraordinary man, I've learned that true success lies in doing good." The applause was long and warm. Many in the audience cried, moved by the transformation they had witnessed. "I'd like to say something." Emily took the microphone, her voice still small but full of determination. "My grandpa always told me that no matter how many mistakes a person has made, there's always time to start over. Mr. Richard proved that's true." She turned to the businessman. "Thank you for keeping your word and giving everyone a new chance. My grandpa would be so proud." Richard bent down to her level and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for teaching me the true meaning of courage," he whispered in her ear. Thunder moved closer to them, as if wanting to join the embrace. Emily laughed and included the bull in the affectionate gesture, creating an image that was photographed and shared thousands of times on social media. In the following months, Clearwater Ranch became an international case study. Delegations from other countries regularly arrived to learn about the humane management model developed there. Emily, who had just turned 8, grew accustomed to welcoming visitors from around the world, always accompanied by Thunder, who had become her inseparable companion. "She's a phenomenon," remarked a German documentary filmmaker who was shooting a special about the ranch. The way she communicates with animals is simply extraordinary. It's not extraordinary at all, Emily replied with the simplicity typical of children. You just treat animals like they're people, with kindness, respect, and patience. The girl's wisdom continued to astonish adults worldwide. Her phrase, "treat animals like they're people," became the official motto of the Humane Management Program and was translated into dozens of languages. Margaret, now 66, had found a new purpose in life. She not only coordinated the program at Clearwater Ranch, but also consulted with other farms wanting to implement similar methods. Her cane had been replaced by steadier, more confident steps, as if fulfilling an old dream had renewed her strength. Thomas would be so proud, she often remarked. He always dreamed of seeing his techniques used to improve animals' lives across the country. The ranch thrived financially too. Defying the pessimistic predictions of some competitors, the investment in animal welfare had resulted in healthier, more productive, and more valuable livestock. The calves born on the ranch were highly sought after by buyers from across the United States. 1 year after the auction incident, Richard decided to pay a special tribute. He built a small chapel on the ranch grounds, dedicated to the memory of Thomas Wilson. The inauguration ceremony was simple but deeply moving. "This chapel isn't just a monument," Richard explained to those present. "It's a constant reminder that we must treat all living beings with dignity and respect." Emily placed flowers on the small plaque at the chapel's entrance. "Thomas Wilson, the man who taught us that love is the greatest force in the world." Thunder was there too, standing respectfully behind the girl, as if he understood the solemnity of the moment. The bull had become a living symbol of transformation and redemption. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 2 years after the famous auction, the story of Emily and Thunder had transcended the borders of the United States. A children's book based on the true story was published and became an international bestseller. The documentary film, The Girl and the Bull, won awards at film festivals around the world. But for Emily, now 9 years old, international fame mattered less than her afternoons on the ranch, playing with the animals and learning from her grandmother about life and love. "Grandma," she asked one day, as they watched Thunder grazing peacefully, "why do people do bad things to each other?" Margaret thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes, my dear, people do bad things because they're hurting inside. Other times, it's because no one ever taught them how to do good. But you know what I've learned after all these years? What? It's never too late for someone to change. Mr. Richard is proof of that. He was a harsh and unfair man, but when he found a reason to change, he transformed completely." Emily nodded, absorbing her grandmother's wisdom. "And do you know what that reason was?" Margaret continued. "What? You, my girl. Your courage, your love for animals, your ability to forgive. You brought out the best in his heart." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Richard and Michael, who were walking across the pasture. "Emily," Richard called out, "we have a surprise for you." The girl ran toward the two men, curious about what the surprise could be. "What is it?" "The veterinary school decided to create a scholarship in your honor," Michael explained. "Starting next year, any student who wants to specialize in animal behavior and humane management can apply for the Emily Wilson Scholarship." The girl's eyes widened. "Wilson? But my last name is Wilson." "Exactly," Richard smiled. "The scholarship carries your family name, honoring both you and your grandfather. It's a way to ensure your legacy lives on for generations." Margaret joined the group, moved by the news. "Thomas would have been so happy," she murmured. "He always dreamed his techniques would be taught in universities." "And they will," Michael assured her. "The first group of scholarship recipients will begin their studies right here on the ranch, learning directly from Emily and from you." The idea of teaching other young people excited Emily. She had always loved sharing what she knew about animals, and the prospect of helping future veterinarians develop a more compassionate approach thrilled her. "Can I teach them about Thunder?" she asked. "Of course," Richard laughed. "He'll be our official assistant professor." As if understanding they were talking about him, Thunder walked over to the group and gently rested his head on Emily's shoulder. The affectionate gesture, already a routine between the two, never failed to move those who witnessed it. In the following months, preparations to welcome the first scholarship recipients kept the entire ranch bustling. Classrooms were built, laboratories were equipped, and comfortable dormitories were erected to house the students. Emily actively participated in planning the curriculum. Despite her young age, her suggestions were always valuable and demonstrated a deep understanding of animal behavior. "The students need to learn that every animal is unique," she said during a meeting with the university professors. "You can't always use the same technique with everyone. It's like people. Each one is different and needs different care." The program's lead professor carefully noted each of the girls' observations. "Emily is right," he remarked. "Too often in academic training we end up generalizing too much. What she's proposing is a more individualized and empathetic approach." When the first 10 scholarship recipients arrived at the ranch, Emily was nervous. It was the first time she'd have the responsibility of teaching people older than her. "What if they don't take me seriously?" she asked her grandmother the night before classes began. "My dear," Margaret reassured her, "you've already proven that age has nothing to do with wisdom. These young people are here because they want to learn from you. Just be yourself and everything will work out." On the first day of class, Emily was in the corral with Thunder when the students arrived. The bull, now 10 years old and even more imposing, immediately caught the attention of the future veterinarians. "This is Thunder," Emily introduced her companion. "He's the one who taught me that every animal has its own story and feelings." One of the students, a young man around 20 named Jason, asked, "Emily, how did you discover you had this special ability with animals?" The girl thought for a moment. "I don't think it's a special ability," she replied. "It's just a different way of looking. My grandfather taught me to see animals not as objects or products, but as beings who feel joy, sadness, fear, and love, just like we do." "But how do we apply that in veterinary practice?" asked a student named Rachel. Emily smiled and stepped closer to Thunder. "Want to see an example?" She placed her hand on the bull's forehead and closed her eyes for a few seconds. "Thunder is telling me his right hind hoof is a little sore," she announced. "He must have stepped on a rock yesterday in the new pasture." The students exchanged skeptical glances. How could a child diagnose something like that? Dr. Parker, who was observing the class, stepped forward to examine the hoof Emily had indicated. After a few minutes of careful inspection, he found a small wound between the animal's hooves. "She's right," he said, impressed. "There's a shallow cut here that could be causing discomfort." The students' skepticism turned to admiration. They began to realize Emily truly had something special to teach. "How did you know that?" Jason asked, genuinely curious. "I observe," Emily explained simply. "The way he stepped was a little different than usual, and when I touched him I could feel he was shifting his weight to avoid putting pressure on that hoof." "That's amazing," Rachel murmured. "It's like you have a telepathic connection with him." "It's not telepathy," Emily laughed. "It's just attention. Most people are always in a hurry. They don't stop to really observe animals. But they're always communicating with us. We just need to learn their language." The classes became an absolute success. The students not only learned conventional veterinary techniques, but also developed a special sensitivity to animal welfare. Each of them would leave the ranch with a completely new perspective on the profession. During the 3 months of the course, Emily proved to be a natural-born teacher. Her patience with the students and her ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms impressed everyone. "She has a gift for teaching," the program coordinator remarked to Margaret. "I've never seen someone so young with such pedagogical wisdom." "It's Thomas in her," Margaret smiled. "He was also an excellent teacher. He always had the patience to train the new ranch hands." On the last day of the course, the students organized a tribute to Emily. They created a mural with photos of all the special moments they had shared during their time at the ranch. "Emily," Jason said, speaking on behalf of the group, You changed our lives. We came here thinking we'd learn about animals, but we learned about humanity. Thank you, she replied, moved. You all taught me so much too. You showed me that Grandpa's knowledge can help people all over the world. Thunder was present at the ceremony as always. The bull had grown accustomed to the students and developed a special bond with each of them. We'll miss Thunder too, Rachel said, stroking the animal's muzzle. He was our first teacher here. You can come back anytime you want, Emily assured them. This will always be your home. When the students left, they carried with them not just technical knowledge, but a new philosophy of life. Many of them would become leaders in their regions, spreading the principles of humane management across the country. 3 years after the famous auction, Clearwater Ranch had become a global reference center for animal welfare. Emily, now 10 years old, remained the heart of this transformation. Do you know what makes me proudest of all this? Richard said to Margaret one quiet afternoon. What? Seeing how that brave little girl transformed not just this ranch, but hundreds of lives. The students who passed through here are already changing the world, each in their own way. Margaret smiled, watching Emily play with a group of calves in the pasture. Thomas always said a person with a pure heart could change the whole world. He was right. Thunder approached the two adults, as if wanting to join the conversation. The bull had become a living symbol of the ranch's philosophy, proof that even the hardest heart could be touched by true love. You know what I sometimes think, Margaret continued, stroking the animal's muzzle, that this whole story was planned from above. Thomas, even after passing, found a way to keep doing good through our Emily. I believe that too, Richard agreed. There are things in life that can't be explained by logic alone. What happened here was a miracle of love. Emily came running toward the three of them, followed by the calves who could no longer keep up with her pace. Grandma! Mr. Richard! She called out, breathless. Come see, Daisy had her calf. Daisy was a cow Emily had helped care for during a difficult pregnancy. The birth of her calf was a special moment for the entire ranch. The group made their way to the barn, where Daisy rested with her newborn. The calf, a white-coated female with brown spots, nursed peacefully. Look how beautiful she is, Emily sighed. What should we name her? How about Hope? Margaret suggested. She represents everything we've built here. Hope, Emily repeated, testing the name. Perfect. Welcome to the family, Hope. The calf lifted her head at the sound of her name, as if she already knew she was part of something special. Thunder approached the stall and snorted softly, a way of welcoming the new member of the ranch. At that moment, watching the peaceful and love-filled scene, everyone present knew they had been part of something truly magical. The impulsive bet at an auction had turned into the most beautiful story of redemption and transformation any of them could have imagined. The ranch would keep growing, the students would keep arriving, and Emily would keep teaching the world about the transformative power of love. But the real miracle had already happened, proof that it's never too late to start over, and that a brave child can be the key to extraordinary change. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this touching story. What moment moved your heart the most? Do you think Emily made the right choice by forgiving Richard? Leave your comments with sincere words. I love reading your opinions. Thank you so much for joining me, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.